Back, everybody, to the Just Talk Hoops podcast. Hope you guys are having a great holiday season, a great week, whatever. I know that it's been a very weird schedule. We're getting this out on a Wednesday. It's New Year's Eve. I know it's a weird schedule. I do apologize for that. Hopefully, we'll be able to get back to that schedule. But we are getting an episode out, and I'm thinking I'm going to do a little something different today, right? So you guys know that I don't script my episodes. I'm not reading off a script. I haven't planned out the entire episode beforehand, but I do go in with like a skeleton, a bare bones structure of like, okay, here's what I want to talk about. If I'm doing my all-star picks, then I put all my all-star, like all the guys I think are going to make an all-star. Sometimes I put a little reasoning. Award picks, obviously, I decide all that beforehand so that I can actually think through it and say, and I'm not just going off dome, right? But today is just a ramble. Today is just me going about whatever. I don't know how long this is going to be. I don't know how interesting it's going to be. Hopefully, I'll be able to keep you guys in the loop kind of my thought process as I go through this, but it is literally just me talking about basketball. It is just talking hoops. If this ends up being something that you guys enjoy, let me know. I can do more of these. It might just be a shorter episode, and I could maybe get some out like in weekday times, probably. Maybe not, but I guess we'll see about that. But if you guys do enjoy it, please let me know. I will still do my games of the week at the very end, so I'll be able to like those. I do pick the game beforehand, so I'm not just sitting here like there have been episodes where I've just been sitting here like, okay, let me choose one real quick and make up my. But no, I did pick those beforehand, so we'll talk about those. Obviously, it's a bit of a shorter week. I am planning on getting one out this weekend, so I will get that episode out for you guys. But so it's a shorter week, it's a shorter game slate, it's a weird schedule. I understand that, but hopefully you guys will still be interested with what I have to say. And if you enjoy it, please do let me know. If you don't enjoy it, then you can deal with one episode that, we'll be back on Sunday. You only have to wait a few more days. Anyway, getting started. I'm wearing the new Dikembe Mutombo jersey today. It's the Black Sixers jersey. For anyone who's listening on Spotify, you'll just have to picture me in a black Dikembe Mutombo jersey. But I got this one for Christmas. Super grateful for this. I think it's an awesome jersey. I do love these jerseys. And Dikembe Mutombo is actually my first repeat in my jersey collection. So every other player is unique, right? So I've got one Kevin Durant jersey, I've got one Julius Erving jersey, I've got one Peyton Watson jersey, I've got one, like all these different jerseys. Dikembe Mutombo is the only one who repeats. Shout out to Dikembe Mutombo, one of my favorite players of all time. I do love a specialist, right? I think I've said this before on this channel. Like, I love a specialist. I love a guy who does one thing exceptionally well, and that makes them a very valuable player. Dikembe Mutombo is one of those players, right? One of the best shot blockers of all time. Great rebounder as well. Great defender overall. But offensively didn't provide a whole lot. I do really enjoy those players who it's like, they just do their thing, right? They do their thing. They have a niche role, and niche is a word that's overused. But they like Dikembe Mutombo had a niche role. He did everything on he didn't do everything. He did everything on defense, nothing on offense really. I mean, he did some stuff. I don't want to disrespect Dikembe Mutombo. Rest in peace. One of my favorite players of all time. And I never got the chance to see him play because he was out of the league before I started watching basketball, before I was, I believe, born. I think he was out of the league before I was even born. But yeah, one of my favorite players of all time for sure. And now I feel like he retired a little bit. I can't remember exactly when he retired, but he had a really long career. He had a sneaky long career. But this is the year that they went to the finals, right? Allen Iverson and that team. Allen Iverson, obviously one of the better performances of really, really good MVP season that year. I think that Allen Iverson is an interesting player because I was just having a conversation with one of my buddies the other day about where Allen Iverson is in terms of like players without rings all time, right? And I know a couple weeks ago I talked about Chris Paul and like ring culture and how there are a lot of great players all time without rings. And I was thinking like, okay, so who are the guys that don't have a ring that are greater all time than Allen Iverson? So I came up with James Harden, I think, is greater than AI. I think that's close. I think that depending on your criteria, you could go either way. I would take Harden personally. Steve Nash, Chris Paul, right? Some of those point guards. I think Russell Westbrook has a case. I would have to think about that. Look at the I mean, Russ has had a really great career, obviously. I would take Elgin Baylor, who was on the 1972 Lakers team that won the championship, but only for like 9 games at the start of the year, right? So then he left that, he retired, he ended his career, and then they went on to win the championship. So I don't know if I really consider that a ring, seeing as he wasn't on that team. So I would say that he's a player who never won a championship. Karl Malone, we don't talk about him. Charles Barkley. Like, there are a lot of great all-time players. I would take most of the guys that I just mentioned over at AI. I think that Harden, there's a debate. I think Russ, there's a debate. If you want to say AI is, Steve Nash, there's a debate as well. If you want to say AI is over either one of those guys, I'm perfectly okay with that. But did I say, yeah, like, I just think that AI, I feel like AI has two meanings now, so I'm trying to, but like, I'm talking about Allen Iverson here, but I think Allen Iverson has a debate over both of those guys. It depends on your criteria, right? I think that a lot of people kind of get mixed up about, like, there's not a single way to determine how great a player is, right? And I think that that's a big problem in NBA discourse, especially today. You'll see that I just have a weird ramble of tangents that I'm just kind of connecting together. So you're going to have to just stick with me here. But one of my problems with NBA discourse today, especially all-time stuff, is that people don't know how to define great players. Like, they don't know how to define greatness. And it's a hard thing to do. But a lot of people will be like, well, I have this guy first and this guy eighth, and they'll have completely different criteria as to how they're ranking them. I think you have to have a set method. If you want to make a serious, like, top whatever list all time, I think you have to have a set of criteria that you abide to, right? So if you're someone who really values winning, then yeah, you can say, hey, I think Michael Jordan's the greatest player of all time, but you have to have, I think, Bill Russell in your top 5 at least, right? If you're someone who values dominance a lot, then yeah, you can have, you could have LeBron potentially as your top 1, but you need Shaq to be really high. You need Wilt Chamberlain to be really high. If you're someone who values statistics, once again, Wilt's got to be up there. I think that it does become difficult for us to really say this is great. Like, if you value impact on the game, then Steph Curry should be really high. Then Magic Johnson should be high. Like, Michael Jordan, like, all these guys should be, it's all dependent on what your criteria is, right? So I'm someone who values longevity a little bit more than I value stuff like cultural impact, which is one of the reasons that I have LeBron James as my personal greatest player of all time, right? I obviously, I value other things over longevity. I value your peak. I value your winning. I value your impact on winning, right? Which is not quite the same as winning. Like, if you're a guy like now I'm completely blanking on an example here, but if you're a guy like a Robert Horry, right, you're someone who, and I love Robert Horry, but you're someone who was in the right place at the right time. Great role player, right? You can talk about him in terms of greatest role players, but when you then say, oh, well, he won 7 championships, that does not make him better than the other players, because there's more impact on winning from other players. Right, but if you're someone who looks at two-way play, right, if you're someone who looks at each end of the floor, then you have to account that into what makes greatness, right? So I think that it's very difficult. That's why there will never be a consensus all-time list, right? There will never be a consensus GOAT. There will never be, partially because nostalgia plays a factor, partially because favoritism plays a factor. There are still people that say LeBron James and Michael Jordan are in top 5, right? I don't see that logic. I don't see how you can, and if you want to make a case for Bill Russell or Kareem or Wilt as the greatest player of all time, you can go ahead and do that. I don't think, like, I think personally, to me, based on my criteria, it's a two-man race between Jordan and LeBron. I can see each argument. I can see how either one of them, like, there are a lot of people that debate to me about, well, I think Michael Jordan did this, this, this. I'm like, that's true. LeBron James did this, this, this. It's an interesting debate, and I get tired of the GOAT debate. I think that it's something that gets a little bit too much media attention just because there are so many other great players we could highlight. But I do think that it is part of any sport, right? Besides maybe the ones that there isn't a GOAT debate. Like, it's pretty hard to make a case in track against Usain Bolt, right? It's pretty hard to make a case in hockey against Wayne Gretzky. That is obviously not what we're talking about here. But, if you guys want to just talk puck podcast, I don't know anything about hockey, but someone start that. Anyway, I just think that it's difficult. Like the GOAT debate, it's something that gets talked about a lot. It gets talked about a little bit too much for my liking, just because it's like we could talk about something else. We're never going to change each other's mind. I'm not going to change some 45-year-old who watched Michael Jordan in his peak. I'm not going to change their mind. They're probably not going to change my mind because I've done research. I'm set in my decision because of the fact that I've made my decision, right? Now I do think that there's definitely a chance that that could change with time, right? There will always be great players. But it's a constantly fluctuating list. It's very difficult to make a all-inclusive list. I made a top 50 of all-time list last year sometime. It's on Spotify only. I think it wasn't on. Yeah, it was definitely not on YouTube. So if you want to go check out Spotify, go check that out. I think it was a decent list. There's things that I'd probably go back and change now. It's very difficult to make one of those lists, but. A player who's made his name known in a lot of those lists recently is Nikola Jokic. And I mean, he was already in, a top 50 list. He's been in that for years now, right? But all of a sudden people are saying, well, is this a top 10 player of all time? I'm seeing some people put him as high as top 3, top 5. I think that's ridiculous. I don't think, and I'm a big Jokic fan, right? I live in Denver. I love the Nuggets. I think that that's way too high to put him. There are just a few, like, first of all, he needs the longevity, right? We haven't seen his whole career play out. His prime, right? You could talk about that and say his peak, his prime is one of the greater we've seen. I would agree with that. I think that he does have a greater peak than some of those guys in that, like, top 15, that top 10 maybe. But I think it's difficult for us to say right now. Like, we haven't seen the longevity. We haven't seen the sustained winning. We've seen him make the finals once. It's just, you can't put him in the top 3, top 5 with that. Plus, the defense is an issue, right? There are no other players in the top 15, top 20 that are as much of a liability on the defensive end. And there are certain parts of defense that Nikola Jokic does really well. His hands are really good for a center. He's really good at interrupting passing lanes, but he's not a good vertical threat. He's not a good rim protector, which as a 7-footer, it's very difficult to be an impactful defender if you can't protect the rim. But he's not a great defender. And you look at the rest of the top 10, you could say that Steph and Magic are the two worst defenders in there in most people's top 10. If you have someone crazy in your top 10, then maybe not. But Steph and Magic, are probably the worst. Only like not all defensive caliber defenders on there. And you can hide them a little bit better because Steph, he's a smaller guard. You don't expect him to be a great defender. And he's not terrible, right? It's not like, hunt Steph out. It's like, no, he's just another guard. He's not going to lock up your best player, but he'll be there. He'll do something on the defensive end. You're not hunting Steph Curry in space every opportunity you get. A guy like Magic Johnson, he's not an incredible defender for his size, but he is, since he does play the point guard position, it's like that size did make him a little bit better of a defender than the average point guard potentially, just because he, even though his defensive fundamentals weren't quite as sound, he still has more reach on shot blocks, better shot contester because of that size. He can defend more positions because of that size. It doesn't necessarily mean he's a great defender, but he's not, like, you're not hunting him every possession. I think that one thing that people do get mistaken, and it's a big reason why some people say, well, Jokic is a good defender, is because they look at defensive stats a little bit too much when tracking defense. So they're saying that Nikola Jokic, who gets steals, who occasionally gets blocks, isn't a bad defender because look at the steals and blocks. That's not awful, right? But then you have to watch the games. Steals and blocks can be very misleading because when you look at a guy like a Tony Allen who didn't get quite as many steals throughout his career, he's still an all-time great defender, as opposed to a guy like Allen Iverson who led the league in steals in this year, 2001. I think he might have done it a few times. Who I wouldn't consider an all-time great defender. He was good at forcing turnovers, but I'm not, if I'm looking at, Tony Allen versus Allen Iverson, I'm taking Tony Allen, the battle of the Allens there, I'm taking Tony Allen pretty clearly, right, as a defender. Obviously, as a player, it's Allen Iverson. But, like, as a defender, I'm taking Tony Allen because you can't just look at, steals, blocks numbers and say, that guy is a better defender, because that is not how that works. You have to look at all the other stuff. You have to look at their ability, like their positioning. You have to look at their ability to force them into bad situations. Like even if they're not getting a steal, if they're forcing turnovers in other ways, if they're forcing bad passes, if they're forcing bad shots, if they're contesting shots well, if they're switching well, if they play well in space. None of that shows up on a stat sheet, right? Maybe you can look at advanced stats. You can look at their defensive box, their defensive rating. You can look at their, and I don't think defensive rating is as valuable for players. I like that as a measure for teams, and we're going to talk about the Nets in a second, and I'll talk about defensive rating. But I do think it's really difficult for us to say, okay, well, this is a better defender because they have more steals. That doesn't necessarily work. Now, you can look at a guy like a Dikembe Mutombo, who is a great shot blocker, and say, wow, what a great shot blocker. And that shows some of his rim protection value. But you can't automatically look at someone and say, wow, they get a lot. Like if you look at Jay Huff, who's, I believe, I don't know if he still is, but he's was leading the NBA in blocks for a while, blocks per game. And if you look at him and say, that's a better defender than Rudy Gobert, then you're not watching the games, right? Now, I like Jay Huff. I liked him since he was on the Nuggets. And I think that he's talented. I think he's fun. But Rudy Gobert is a much, much better defensive presence than Jay Huff has been, ever will be. And, I think Rudy Gobert gets a lot of hate for not having a put-together offensive game. And for, like people like to talk about, like, oh, well, he got fried by Luka on the perimeter in that one position, because that is not the role that Rudy Gobert plays. And Luka Doncic is one of the better offensive players we've ever seen, right? Rudy Gobert is one of the best rim protectors of all time. Rudy Gobert is, although he's not great in space, he's not, the worst we've ever seen. He's not incredibly switchable, but still, he's an incredible rim protector. He's an incredible deterrent, right? People don't want to go up against Rudy Gobert. I was at the Nuggets game, like I said, on Christmas Day, and when Rudy Gobert was in the paint, the Nuggets could not get to the paint. Not well. Jonas Valanciunas tried to go up against Rudy Gobert one-on-one. That didn't work. He tried it like 3 times. It didn't work. Rudy Gobert has great defensive fundamentals, great defensive abilities. Guys like Jamal Murray would try and get to the rim. Guys like Peyton Watson would try and get to the rim. And Rudy Gobert is there as a rim-protecting presence, and he's limiting their ability to get there, right? So now they're relying on threes, which weren't falling incredibly for parts of that game, and he had a really great defensive game. Now, he did foul out because he did have some plays where he overreached, or he tried to, he played a little bit too physical, and that's a brand of basketball that the Minnesota Timberwolves play, right? They play physical defense. And I'm not mad at all about that from Rudy Gobert, right? I think that, I didn't used to be a Rudy Gobert fan. I wouldn't consider myself a fan, but I do think that he does get disrespected a little bit too much because people don't understand the value that he does bring on the defensive end. It's difficult for people to recognize that when a lot of people are just box score watching. And, he's put up consistently great block numbers throughout his career, but, they're box score watching, they're saying, wow, look, he doesn't score the ball well for a center. Or, he doesn't score the ball well, how can he be an all-star? And it's like, well, because he's one of the better defenders in the league. Let's circle back to the Nuggets and Nikola Jokic a little bit, because obviously there have been headlines made about them in just the past couple days, which are not good for the Nuggets. It's the bad type of headlines. And I have to talk about that on today's episode. So obviously, they're already missing Aaron Gordon and Christian Brown, right? They've been missing them for most of the year. They've been doing okay without them. Last week, I said on my episode, I was like, oh, well, the Nuggets, their Christmas wish is to get those guys back, right? And Santa Claus, clearly, because he listens to my podcast, me and Santa are tight, and he listened, and I guess he misunderstood me because he decided, oh, you know what? There goes Jokic's knee, which is, and the Nuggets are lucky because none of the ligaments were torn, right? And so he's not going to miss too much time, and he's going to actually be able to come back in about 4 weeks. But it's very unfortunate for the Nuggets because Nikola Jokic is a guy who has historically had some of the craziest on-off numbers we've ever seen. Right, when you look at his value versus the value of his backup, he has consistently been like, wow, when Jokic is on the court, they are the best team in basketball. When he's off, they are the worst team in basketball. Now you're taking him off the court for 4 weeks. They play 16 games in the next 4 weeks. He's already missed a game this year, so he's most likely not going to be able to win MVP, which sucks. And now I think that I don't necessarily hate the 65 game rule. I think maybe it could be 60 games. But I do understand that they want people to be healthy. I do understand they want an incentive to make people healthy. If they want to keep people healthy, maybe they should just work on eliminating back-to-backs, maybe work on eliminating some of the stress of the schedule on these guys. But that's another conversation. I don't think Jokic cares about the MVP at all. It does suck to see such a historically great season. I think right now he was the easy favorite for MVP, and I'll talk a little bit here about the who I think should win MVP now. But it is really difficult for the Nuggets to lose their guy, right? And Nikola Jokic is that guy. He is one of the best players we've ever seen, really. We were just talking about like he's making cases in that top 15, that top 10 debate that all of a sudden it's getting uncomfortable for some people because it's like, oh man, he's getting up there, right? And Nikola Jokic, he's easily one of the greatest players we've ever seen. So it sucks to see him go out, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see what the Nuggets do with him out so hopefully Aaron Gordon, Christian Brown should be coming back in a matter of a week, a couple weeks. I heard that they should be back at the end of this road trip. So the Nuggets, and it's a road trip. Like they have a 7-game road trip coming up, 7 straight games on the road without Nikola Jokic, without Cam Johnson. I think Cam Johnson's going to be out for a little while. The Christian Brown and Aaron Gordon are both going to be out for some of these games at least. So right now your starting lineup is looking like Jamal Murray, Tim Hardaway Jr., Spencer Jones, Peyton Watson, and Jonas. And I'm a huge fan of Peyton Watson. He's one of my favorite players in the league. I've been really, really impressed with Spencer Jones this year. I've been really impressed with the value that Tim Hardaway Jr. and Jonas have brought. And we know what Jamal Murray does, right? Jamal Murray's a really good basketball player. I don't think he's a number one, but he's a really good basketball player. But the fact is, 4 of those guys were off the bench to start the year. The Nuggets are missing 4 of their 5 starters at the moment. That is awful. They've got the injury bug, the worst worse than most players or most teams ever get it. It is awful, right? And it feels like the teams last year, right? Like the Mavericks and the Sixers were in a similar spot, but the Nuggets, before they had all these injuries, were playing so incredibly well that now you're like, oh man, like what's going to happen in these next few weeks, and are they going to be able to bounce back? Oh, excuse me, sorry. Are they going to be able to bounce back from that? And are they going to look like that same Nuggets team we seen earlier? Are they going to look even better, right? Because they've been missing, like I said, Aaron Gordon and Christian Brown for so long that once they come back for the playoffs, now they've got to make the playoffs and not lose too many games in the stretch where Jokic is out. But this team could potentially look really scary. And I think if this team potentially, like say they go on a little bit of a losing streak, which I expect them to do in these next 16 games, and they drop to, I don't know, 7th in the standings. And, maybe even further. If they come into the playoffs as a 7th seed, an 8th seed, a 6th seed, somewhere in there, right, then that would suck to be one of the top seeded teams because all of a sudden you're like, man, you got the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd seed, and all of a sudden you have to play the Denver Nuggets, who are I think the 2nd best team in the league, personally. I'm still saying the Thunder are the best. We can talk about the Thunder in a bit too, but I just think that it's really interesting. But it's going to be really, really interesting to see what the Nuggets look like for these next 4 weeks, and it might be bad interesting. I think this is going to be a testament. I think it's going to be a test of David Adelman as a coach, right? Because we see great coaches can win games without an incredible supporting cast. Now it's not like, oh, he's had time to work with this. No, like Nikola Jokic is your guy. You've been consistently like running the offense, running everything through Jokic. So now you got to look at, okay, well, the bench rotation is in all the time, right? And now your bench rotation is now because you're moving 4 bench guys up, you're now moving 4 lower bench guys up into spots, right? So Jalen Pickett, he's gonna get a lot more minutes. Bruce Brown is gonna see an uptick in his playing time. I think we're gonna see Julian Strawther get a lot of minutes. And I think that Julian Strawther's stock is going to rise in the next couple of weeks. I think that Strawther is a talented player. I think a lot of people are going to see that because he's going to need to score the ball because you're missing a lot of your guys, right? I think that a guy like Zeke Naji and Deron Holmes minutes are going to have to increase, and I don't know how comfortable I feel with them playing, quality minutes. And it's just going to be really interesting to see like what David Adelman does, how he gets this team to buy in without Nikola Jokic. And I think that, it's possible if he does a really good job coaching, then maybe they could win some of these games, but I expect them to be far under 500 in these games. I expect them to maybe go like 4-12. And we'll see, like if Aaron Gordon and Christian Brown come back, then that could help. That could soften the blow a little bit, but I still don't expect them to be great. It's going to be interesting to see what this offense looks like. This is the first time we've really seen Jamal Murray as the guy for a whole stretch of games. So we're going to see what he can do. I think that this is a big test of Jamal Murray. Like what do you do as a number one option for the next few weeks? Like, are you going to step up, or is your efficiency going to drop off a cliff? Like it's going to be interesting to see what it is. And they trade away Michael Porter Jr., who's been consistently one of their more injury-prone players, and he's been healthy, knock on wood, this year, and he's done really well for the Nets. And now it's like, man, I kind of wish you had him because he's been like he would have helped being a scoring option. He's been the number one option for the Nets so far this year, and we can talk about them a little bit too because I think right now you take the Nuggets and you take the Nets and you put them up against each other in a 7-game series. And obviously, with the Nuggets injuries at the moment, like if it's the starting lineup and bench rotation that I just talked about for the Nuggets against this healthy Nets team, I would take the Nets, to be honest with you. I think they're better coached. I think Jordi Fernandez is an incredible coach. They've been bought in extremely well recently. They've played really good basketball as of late. They've won, I think, 7 of their last 10, or I guess they just lost one the other night against the Warriors. So that's probably no longer the case, but they still have been on a really, really good streak. They've had the best defense in the league in the month of December, last I checked, or top 2, right? It's between them and the Thunder, which is a conversation that they weren't even close to before December, right? Because they had the second to worst defense in the entire league up until this point, and now all of a sudden they're playing really good basketball. They're really bought in. They're using that length, that athleticism that is present on their roster, and now they are looking like a really good basketball, or not a really good basketball team. Let me not get ahead of myself, but they're looking like a real basketball team. They're looking like they've got something to build on in the future. They look like Jordi Fernandez has really, turned around the culture of this team, and it's been fun to watch, honestly. And I think, the Nets and the Nuggets, like, they've kind of switched places here where it's all of a sudden like one of them is bought in, one of them is doing really well. The other one is struggling with injuries and doesn't look like they're going to be great. It's going to be interesting to see what the Nuggets can do. Hopefully those guys come back, right? I hate seeing injuries ruin things. I hate seeing it for anybody, right? It's not just because the Nuggets are one of my favorite teams. It is because injuries suck, right? And I never want to see injuries. I will, never wish injury on any player, never be happy when any player gets injured. That is something that I think is really weird, honestly. And I think that it's difficult to say, like, what this Nuggets team will look like. It's difficult to say, okay, well, they'll have a really good season, because at the end of the day, they probably are going to take a big drop off from this time. They're going to take a big step back. They're going to lose a good number of these games, and it could impact the ending season results, and probably will, right? But, it's going to be interesting to see. The Nets, we talked about them a little bit. The other team, so obviously with the Nets, the team that they are combating against for the number one defensive rating is Oklahoma City Thunder. Now, I have no, delusions that the Nets are anywhere near the Oklahoma City Thunder in terms of their, in terms of how good of a team they are. Obviously, OKC is one of the best, I think the best team in the league. Now, I think we've seen recently that they are nowhere near as bulletproof as we thought they were. They've dropped some games. We've seen the three-point shooting be a bit of an issue, which we saw even in the playoffs a little bit last year, when you're giving a lot of minutes to a lot of guys who are defensive-oriented, guys like Lou Dort, guys like Alex Caruso, guys who don't have incredible three-point jump shots. Now, they can hit them, but they're not incredibly consistent. A guy like and then you're playing two big men, right? You're running that big lineup with Isaiah Hartenstein and Chet Holmgren. Chet's a good shooter for his size, not incredibly consistent though. Isaiah Hartenstein isn't he spaces the floor decently, but he's not gonna light you up from three at any time. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see like if that becomes an issue for them down the line. I know I keep saying stuff is going to be really interesting. That's just kind of my default phrase, and I think that it's potentially an issue for them, but I still do think this is the best team in the league, right? If the playoffs were to start today, I would take the Oklahoma City Thunder as my title favorites. I don't think that they're as bulletproof as they looked. I know there was a lot of talk about like, oh, they might break the win record this year. I think that it's proving that it's very, very difficult to break the win record. We saw the Cavs last year get off to an incredible start, and I mean, the people love to talk a lot about like, oh, well, they're on pace to do this. They're on like the Thunder were on pace to break this record. Yeah, but if a team wins their first game of the season, like I understand that that's different, but like I think we get kind of jump the gun with this pace stuff, and I think that it's becoming clear with the Thunder that it is a lot harder to go 73-9 or better than we originally thought. Let me check. I don't know exactly what their record is as of today. It's 28-5, right? So they would need to only lose 4 more games the rest of the year to tie it. And I just think that it's obvious that that's, it could happen, right? It could happen. Technically, the Knicks or the Spurs could go 73-9 if they win their next 50 games, right? But I do think that it is just clear how difficult it is to be one of those greatest teams of all time. And it's shout out to that Warriors team that went 73-9. Shout out to the Bulls team that went 72-10. Like that is difficult to do. I could see the Thunder approaching 70 wins this year. I think that they could potentially go like 70-12. I could see that happening for sure. But it is very difficult for a team to go 73-9. I mean, we've known this. It just feels like some people forgot. And, I think that they aren't quite as bulletproof as we thought. I do, but like I said, I still think they're the best team in the league. I still think they're the best team in the West. I still think that they're the team you have to go through if you want to win anything. Now, I would love to see the Spurs and the Thunder play in the playoffs because the Spurs have sort of had the Thunder's number so far, and it's been a rivalry, at least from the Spurs end, right? Wembanyama has seemingly taken, just relished beating the Thunder, and we'll see what if that becomes a matchup. My optimal matchups would be like second round. I would love to see Nuggets, Timberwolves, and Spurs Thunder. I think that would be so fun. Whatever the first round matchups have to be for that to get there. Now, obviously, we're a long way away from the playoffs. We're not even halfway through the season. But I do think that this is shaping up to be a really, really great playoffs from the Western Conference. From the East, it's kind of just who knows, right? Like, we've got a lot of unknown teams. We've got a lot of teams who haven't quite lived up to their potential and other teams who are, outliving or, like, kind of, I don't know, outperforming. They're outperforming their expectations, and it's going to be interesting to see what they can do on that side of the league. I think that right now the Eastern Conference, my favorite to win the Eastern Conference would be the Knicks. I do believe in the Knicks. I think that the Knicks, I don't really want to, but I'm not one to hate a team because it's all basketball. But I do think that the Knicks are an incredibly talented basketball team. I think they're the best team in the East and the most ready team in the East, like the most contender-ready team in the East. You look at a team like the Pistons, I think they could definitely make a run, potentially conference finals. They could maybe make the finals, right? I'm not sure what to think about the Pistons. You look at, the Sixers have played good basketball recently, right? They just won one last night. They had VJ Edgecombe had a game winner, and like Joel Embiid has played good basketball in certain times. Like he obviously is not the same player that he was in that 2022, like kind of just that whole realm of like 2019 to 2023, when he was one of the best players in the league. He was in debates for the best player in the league. And it sucks to see that he's no longer at that level, but he's still putting in good production, still putting in good numbers. Tyrese Maxey has taken a huge jump. And now you look at this team and you say, wow, they've really got something going over there in Philly, and I'm kind of excited to see what they can do with this franchise. Honestly, I've never really been a Philly fan, but I am excited to see what this franchise can do. Like I said, I don't really hate teams because it's all basketball to me, and I don't have problems with basketball teams, right? Because it's basketball. Sometimes stuff annoys me, and I occasionally have problems with players. Especially, I don't know if you guys saw this, but Draymond Green was so. I don't know, like yeah, if you're not a Nets fan, you might not know Mr. Whammy as well, but he's like a 90-year-old man. I think he's 89. 90-year-old man. He goes to every Nets home game. He goes to every single one, and he's just this old guy. He's nice. He never talks any like he stands up and he goes behind the hoop when the other team is shooting, and he does his little hand signals, tries to get them to miss. No harm in it. And he never talks. He always has a sign before the game. Like he's a very nice guy. His wife passed. He seems like a very nice guy from everything I've seen. He seems like a chill, nice guy. I've never met him personally, so I can't speak to his to who he is as a person. But he seems like, from what I've seen, a very nice guy. His wife passed away a couple of years ago. Rest in peace to her. But like, I love Mr. Whammy. I always have. Like that, I watched him at all the Nets games growing up, and then Draymond Green in the Nets game the other night. He's shooting free throws. He hits a free throw, and he says to Mr. Whammy, he's like, "Yeah, sit your ass down, old man." And I've always been a guy who has been like, "Oh, well, I think that Draymond is, Draymond is." He's never been one of my favorite players, but I recognize the value he brings. I recognize his defensive value. I recognize his playmaker value. I recognize his value as part of the heart of that Warriors team. But I'm getting tired of it. And it's not even just that, right? Like, that was annoying. That was something that I saw, and I was like, because Mr. Whammy is a guy that, like, as a Nets fan, I kind of, he's a fan icon. I was like, that it kind of pissed me off, right? But I understand that's part of the game, sort of. But I also think, honestly, at this point in his career, Draymond Green has just gotten to be immature. And I understand playing physical defense. I don't understand stepping on people's chests. I don't understand getting into fights with everybody. I don't understand when you throw a bad pass and you make a turnover and then get mad and then proceed to like mess up your teams. Like, I think at this point in his career, Draymond Green, as good of a basketball player as he is, the off the court or the on the court antics and the off the court persona are starting to hurt the Warriors. And for a while, like, obviously he's a winner, right? He was a winner for a long time. He's a 4-time champion, and in those years he was valuable, he was great, and that spirit was helpful for the Warriors. But I think that now we have to look at him and say, how long does this go on, right? How long does this, how long do we keep, like, how many other players around the league do we see that are Draymond's age that are consistently doing this, that are consistently getting technicals, that are consistently getting ejected from games, that are consistently, like, making people mad and getting mad themselves and then having it hurt the team, punching their own teammates in practice? Like, I think that it's kind of time for us to look at Draymond and say, is his ability as a basketball player worth his antics? And I get that he's an enforcer. I get that that's part of his value, but, like, it's starting to get to a point where I don't know, right? And I, like, once again, respect to Draymond as a basketball player because he's an all-time great defender. He's a great playmaker. He does the things that you need him to do. But when he's fighting people, when he's playing dirty basketball at times, when he's, like, yelling at fans who aren't really doing, and it's not like the fan was talking to him. The fan was doing motions at the entire stadium is making noise when you're shooting free throws because you're not at home. What do you expect? And now you're telling an old fan and, like, a presumably nice guy, you're, like, talking. It's just like, are you 12 or are you a professional basketball player who's been around the league? I don't know. I'm getting tired of Draymond's antics, honestly. And I do think that now you look at the Warriors and you look at their underproduction this year and you say, like a little bit of this has got to be felt by Draymond Green, I think. But whatever, like it's not a crazy big deal, right? Like this stuff does happen in sports, but it is to a point where it's like, he's consistently getting into trouble. And it's like you can't, you don't want to need a babysitter for your veteran. But I mean, another guy who I kind of think about that with is Anthony Edwards, and obviously Anthony Edwards is much younger and better than Draymond Green, so there's a little more leeway. But I was at that Nuggets game. He had an absolutely incredible game, right? He forced overtime. Anthony Edwards was having an incredible game. He's just such a talented basketball player. But then you look at, he goes into overtime, which he forced. He's the only reason they're in overtime. They go up in overtime. Then the Nuggets make a little bit of a run, right? And all of a sudden it's like, oh man, the Nuggets might, like they took like a 4-point lead. Anthony Edwards gets down the lane. He's wide open. He dunks the ball. It's a good bucket, right? Well done. And then Jokic goes back to inbound the ball, as you do in basketball, as has happened in the NBA hundreds of thousands of times. And Anthony Edwards pokes the ball out of his hands. Standing behind him out of bounds, pokes it out of his hands. Never once have you been able to do that in the history of the NBA. And it wasn't like, oh, he ran past and bumped the ball. He deliberately reached around, poked it out. And that got him a technical because, yeah, that's a delay of game. Like, that's an obvious tech. Like, I've never seen a more obvious tech, right? So he hits the ball out of Jokic's hands, which now that gives the Nuggets, it's a delay of game technical. It gives the Nuggets a free throw and the ball. So now you just gave them free points. And then just a couple minutes later, he's getting all upset with the refs. He's like talking to the refs. He's been talking to the refs consistently throughout overtime. He's getting mad at them. It's an obvious technical foul situation. And like before this, he'd been bumping Jokic. Like he'd been acting very odd, and they'd given him some leeway. And eventually it got to a point where, yeah, they teed him up because, I mean, he's going to them and he's doing this. What do you expect? Like, he's telling them to tee him up. What do you expect, Ant? It feels like, okay, you're in this game, you're playing a great basketball game, and then you get yourself into trouble. Why are you doing that? Like, why are you getting yourself ejected from this game? It was very avoidable. And there will be some Timberwolves fans who are complaining about the refs, who are complaining about, oh man, well that's weak. Not really. That's like a pretty textbook technical foul. Like it's not like, there have been times where players have bounced the ball and gotten a tech. That I think is weak. And I don't like when refs get power hungry, but that's not power hungry. That's just like doing your job. I thought the refs made some bad calls going both directions that night. But Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, they might complain, but they don't get ejected from the game. When it's time for them to focus up and win the game, that's what they did. Anthony Edwards, it was time for him to focus up and win the game, and he got himself ejected. He's an incredible basketball player, and once again, he had an incredible game. And I'm not trying to say that his antics at all make him less of a basketball player or make him not as valuable to the Timberwolves, because he's that guy. But I think that it would be, we can't just look past it and say, oh, well, it's like that might have cost you guys the game. If Ant's still in that game, who knows what it looks like, right? It's just it's very odd to me. And like that and Rudy Gobert fouling out, it's just like he got emotional. He let that get the best of him. And that happens in sports, right? It happens. But Anthony Edwards, we've seen, is consistently an emotional player, consistently a guy who interacts with the other team. And, we're starting to see, we've seen a couple times now that it's like not always the best idea. But, still incredibly talented. I don't mean to go after those guys. I try not to, target people, call people out. I mean for this to be a pretty positive, I mean to give more shout outs than, bring people down, right? So that's what I try to do. But I do have to, like I said, I'm just kind of weaving a story. I'm just kind of going through. So, but anyway, last thing we'll talk about is now, so Nikola Jokic goes out. We talked about the Nuggets a lot today because that's one of the biggest things in the media right now. Nikola Jokic goes out. Who's the MVP? And I think right now it's Shea. You can make a case for. I think Wemby has missed a lot of time. Giannis has probably already missed. I don't know. He might have already missed too much time to win it. Maybe not. He could maybe still get there. But I think that, and also that the Bucks team is just too bad. I think honestly it's Shea's award right now. Luka could potentially jump him, but I do trust Shea a little bit more. I think that team is better. I think that he's had just as good of a season as Luka, and I would give that to Shea at the moment. I think that, and he had a case against Jokic, but I think I would have given it to Jokic pretty clearly if Jokic hadn't gone out. Now I think it's Shea's award. Now if Jokic comes back and plays enough games and doesn't miss a single one the rest of the year, then we've got ourselves a debate. But I just don't see that happening. It looks like his MVP chances are likely dead. His All-NBA, so like All-NBA is going to be, because Tatum is out the whole year, right? We've been missing Tyrese Halliburton the whole year. Kyrie Irving has missed too much time. Anthony Davis has missed a good bit of time. I don't know exactly how many games he's missed. But now Jokic, Wemby, Giannis are all kind of on the chopping block. So first team is going to be Shea, Luka, Ant, and some other people. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with that. But we've obviously got a lot of time left in the season before we get to that. So anyway, we'll move on to our games of the week. I hope you guys enjoyed my just talking. And that was seriously, none of that was scripted. I had no idea I was going to talk about any of that. So last week we only did 4 games. We did Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. We went 2-2. It happens. I already talked a bit about the Wolves Nuggets game. Cavs Rockets. The Cavs, I believe, had a lead in that one and then blew it, if I'm remembering the correct game. Heat Hawks. The Hawks have been disappointing again, and it's like, what? I was expecting them to be a lot better. I really was. Thunder Spurs. I didn't expect the Thunder to be beaten by the Spurs multiple times, but the Spurs kind of have their number. This week, so we're doing Wednesday through Saturday. I'm gonna get one out on Sunday. I promise you guys. Wednesday, Knicks going to San Antonio to play the Spurs. I'm taking the Spurs there. Obviously, the Knicks beat them in the NBA Cup. I expect the Spurs to kind of bounce back. The Spurs have been hot recently. Knicks have been really good. This isn't anything against the Knicks. It's just me thinking that the Spurs are looking good. Thursday, Heat going to Detroit to play the Pistons. I'm taking the Pistons pretty comfortably there. The Pistons have had a really good year. The Heat have been up and down. The Heat have been good this year, but I do trust Detroit a little bit more. Friday, Thunder going to Golden State to play the Warriors. And listen, I was talking a lot earlier in the year about I'm not betting against the Thunder until they give me a reason to. Now they have given me a couple reasons to. They're no longer untouchable. They're no longer a team that I will always pick for. In this game, I'm going to pick for them, just because I do think that they are better than the Warriors. And then Saturday, Celtics going to Los Angeles to play the Clippers. I'm taking the Clippers. That's my upset for the week. The Clippers have won a few in a row. They need to win a good bit more before I actually do give them a real shout-out, before I actually do give them, their real flowers, say that they're actually back. But they have won a few in a row. Kawhi had the first 50-point game of his career the other day. They've been playing good basketball. I expect the Clippers to kind of turn it around. Now, I could be completely wrong. So far, they've absolutely shafted my predictions, but maybe we've got a chance here. We'll see how those games go. You guys drop your predictions in the comments below. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know if you want more of this, just me talking, just based on absolutely nothing and just going. I can definitely do that. I am someone who loves to talk about basketball. I love basketball, in case you couldn't tell from the podcast. But I hope you guys have a great week. Great rest of your week. I will see you this weekend. I will definitely get an episode out this week. Hope you guys enjoyed. Enjoy the games for the rest of the week. Have a great holiday season. Have a great New Year's. If you're going back to work, have fun with that. And yeah, I'll see you guys next week on Just Talk Hoops.